I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Right now, while you rest, your brain is already searching for the signal that tells it to let go. Tonight, you'll discover what science knows about training your mind for deeper sleep, and understand why rest was never meant to be something you had to force. Welcome to Sleepy Science. Wherever you are right now, perhaps already lying down, perhaps feeling the familiar weight of a day that won't quite release you, allow yourself to settle in. We'll explore 100 sleepy science facts about how the mind learns to sleep. From the chemistry of quiet, to the brain's hidden rhythms, to the surprising science of letting go. Feel the weight of your body right now. Notice your breath, slow and real. You are here. You are safe. The night is yours. Your brain does not simply switch off when you fall asleep. It shifts into an entirely different mode of operation, one that is, in many ways, more organized and intentional than waking life. During sleep, neural circuits that were active during the day begin to replay, consolidate, and integrate what you experienced. Memories are sorted. Emotional residue is processed. Toxins that accumulated across your waking hours are cleared through the brain's glymphatic system, which becomes significantly more active once you close your eyes. Sleep is not a pause. It is a second shift. Quieter, less visible, but arguably more essential than everything that happened before it. The mind you bring to tomorrow is built, in large part, tonight. The idea that good sleepers are simply born that way is, according to current sleep science, largely a myth. Sleep is a skill, and like any skill, it responds to practice, habit, and environment. Researchers studying sleep behavior have consistently found that people who report deep, restorative sleep share identifiable patterns: consistent timing, low pre-sleep arousal, and a relationship with the bedroom that is associated with rest rather than alertness. None of these are fixed traits. All of them can be deliberately shaped. The brain learns what to expect from its environment, and over time it responds accordingly. The conditions for deep sleep are learnable. They are not reserved for a fortunate few. Your sleep is regulated by two independent biological systems operating simultaneously. The first is the circadian system, your internal clock, driven by light exposure and anchored to a roughly 24-hour cycle. The second is called sleep pressure, or the homeostatic drive, which builds gradually throughout your waking hours as a chemical called adenosine accumulates in the brain. The longer you stay awake, the more adenosine gathers, and the stronger the pull towards sleep becomes. These two systems work in concert, and when they align, when your internal clock says it is nighttime and your adenosine load is high, sleep comes more easily, more deeply, and with greater restorative quality. Adenosine is the brain's primary sleep pressure molecule, and it is worth understanding what happens to it when you sleep. Throughout your waking hours, adenosine binds to receptors across the brain, gradually dampening alertness and creating that recognizable, heavy, slow feeling that arrives in the late evening. When you finally sleep, adenosine is cleared, metabolized and recycled, so that you wake with what feels like a reset signal. Caffeine works by occupying adenosine receptors without activating them, which is why it suppresses the feeling of tiredness without actually eliminating the underlying sleep debt. The tiredness was always there. Caffeine simply borrowed time. Sleep repays it. The human brain moves through distinct stages of sleep in repeating cycles, each lasting roughly 90 minutes. Within each cycle, the brain descends from light sleep into deep, slow-wave sleep, then rises again into rapid eye movement sleep before the cycle begins anew. The proportion of these stages shifts across the night. The first half of the night is dominated by deep, slow-wave sleep, while the second half contains longer and richer periods of REM. This architecture is not random. It reflects a carefully orchestrated biological sequence, and disrupting any part of it by waking too early, drinking alcohol, or sleeping inconsistently reshapes the structure in ways that affect how rested you feel. Slow-wave sleep, the deepest stage, sometimes called N3, is the phase most closely associated with physical restoration. During this stage, the brain produces large, synchronized electrical waves that ripple across the cortex in a slow, rolling rhythm. Growth hormone is released in its greatest concentration during slow-wave sleep, driving tissue repair, immune function, and metabolic regulation. Recent research has explored the neural circuits through which deep sleep triggers this hormone release, uncovering feedback loops in which the hormone itself helps regulate the transition back toward wakefulness. The brain, in short, is not merely resting during deep sleep. It is rebuilding, quietly, methodically, from the inside out. REM. Sleep takes its name from the rapid movements the eyes make beneath closed lids during this stage. Movements that reflect the intense and dreamlike brain activity occurring just beneath the surface. During REM, the brain becomes nearly as electrically active as it is during waking. But the body is held in a state of muscular paralysis, preventing physical enactment of dreams. REM sleep is believed to be essential for emotional memory consolidation, the processing and integrating of emotionally charged experiences from the day. People who are deprived of REM sleep often show increased emotional reactivity, reduced cognitive flexibility, and difficulty forming new memories on the following day. The prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain most responsible for rational decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation, is exquisitely sensitive to sleep loss. Even a single night of poor sleep measurably reduces prefrontal activity, which is why tired people are more impulsive, more irritable, and more likely to interpret neutral situations as threatening. This is not a character flaw. It is neuroscience. The prefrontal cortex requires sleep to maintain its capacity for calm, clear judgment. Researchers at NIH have described sleep deprivation's effect on the prefrontal cortex as similar in some respects to low-level alcohol intoxication. Present, measurable, and deeply consequential for the quality of thought and feeling. Your body temperature plays a surprisingly direct role in initiating deep sleep. In the hour or two before you naturally fall asleep, your core body temperature begins to drop, a process driven by the dilation of blood vessels near the skin, which releases heat outward. This cooling is a biological signal to the brain that nighttime has arrived. Studies have shown that people fall asleep faster and reach deeper sleep stages more reliably in cool environments, typically between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. The cooling is not incidental. It is part of the brain's descent sequence, the body dimming its internal thermostat as a quiet invitation to let go of the day. Light is the single most powerful regulator of the human circadian clock, and the brain's sensitivity to it is far greater than most people realize. Specialized cells in the retina, called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, detect light, particularly the blue wavelength frequencies common in both sunlight and digital screens, and relay that signal directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a tiny structure in the hypothalamus that serves as the brain's master clock. Exposure to blue-rich light in the evening delays the release of melatonin, effectively telling the brain it is still daytime. This is why dimming screens and reducing overhead lighting in the hour before bed can meaningfully accelerate the brain's shift toward its sleep-initiating state. Melatonin is often misunderstood as a sleep drug, but it is more accurately described as a timing signal. It does not generate sleep directly. Rather, it communicates to every cell in the body that darkness has fallen and that the appropriate biological response is to prepare for rest. Melatonin production begins in the pineal gland roughly 2 hours before your natural sleep onset, and it peaks in the middle of the night before gradually declining toward morning. Taking supplemental melatonin in large doses does not dramatically deepen sleep, but taking small doses, around 0.5 milligrams, at the right time can help shift the circadian clock earlier, which is why it is used to treat jet lag and delayed sleep phase disorder. The default mode network is a set of interconnected brain regions that becomes active when the mind is not focused on a specific external task. During daydreaming, self-reflection, rumination, and the kind of unfocused thought that often fills the gap between lying down and falling asleep. In people with insomnia, the default mode network shows elevated activity at bedtime, suggesting the brain remains locked in a self-referential thinking loop rather than disengaging into pre-sleep quiet. Cognitive training approaches that interrupt or redirect default mode activity, including mindfulness practices and structured thought discharge exercises, have shown promise in reducing this arousal pattern and helping the brain find the quieter, less self-focused state that precedes deep sleep. The concept of cognitive arousal, elevated mental activity at bedtime, is one of the most well-supported explanations for why otherwise healthy people struggle to fall asleep. When the external distractions of the day fall away at night, the mind, lacking a focal point, tends to generate its own content, replaying conversations, anticipating tomorrow's challenges, cataloging unfinished tasks. Researchers have found that this pattern intensifies the longer a person lies awake, because the anxiety about not sleeping itself becomes an additional source of arousal. The brain, attempting to solve the problem of wakefulness, inadvertently prolongs it. Recognizing this loop, without attempting to forcibly stop it, is often the first step toward gently stepping outside it. Sleep spindles are brief bursts of neural oscillation that occur during N2 sleep, the light to moderate stage that makes up roughly half of a typical night. They appear on a brain scan as short, rhythmic spikes, lasting about half a second each, repeated dozens of times per hour. Research has consistently linked sleep spindle density to cognitive performance. People with more frequent spindles tend to perform better on memory tests, show greater learning consolidation, and exhibit higher fluid intelligence scores. Sleep spindles are also thought to act as a gate, protecting the sleeping brain from sensory disruption, suppressing external noise signals so that the sleeper is not unnecessarily awakened by minor sounds. They are, in a acute sense, the brain's own noise-cancelling system. The sleeping brain does something remarkable that the waking brain cannot do as efficiently. It replays the events of the day in compressed, accelerated form. This memory replay, documented through recordings of hippocampal activity in sleeping participants, appears to be the mechanism by which short-term memories are transferred to long-term storage. The hippocampus, which acts as a temporary holding area for new information, communicates with the cortex during slow-wave sleep, progressively shifting experiential memories into more distributed, durable networks. Students who sleep well after learning new material consistently outperform those who stay awake on subsequent tests of the same material. Not because sleep prevents forgetting, but because it actively deepens the encoding. There is a measurable relationship between physical exercise and sleep depth that researchers have studied for decades. Moderate aerobic exercise, a 30-minute walk, a light run, an hour of movement, reliably increases the amount of slow-wave sleep on the following night. The mechanism is not entirely resolved, but current evidence suggests that exercise generates a mild, beneficial metabolic stress that the sleeping brain is particularly well equipped to recover from, and that this recovery process drives the brain more deeply into its restorative stages. Vigorous exercise performed too close to bedtime, within 2 to 3 hours, can delay sleep onset by elevating core temperature and activating the sympathetic nervous system. So timing matters as well as effort. Alcohol has a complicated and often misunderstood relationship with sleep. Many people find that a drink or two in the evening helps them fall asleep faster. And this part is real. Alcohol does have a sedating effect that can reduce the time it takes to lose consciousness. But the second half of the night tells a different story. As the body metabolizes alcohol, it generates arousal, fragmenting sleep, suppressing REM, and increasing the likelihood of early morning waking. Studies consistently show that even moderate alcohol consumption reduces overall sleep quality and measurably decreases slow-wave sleep in the early cycles. The sedation is borrowed time. The debt is collected quietly, while the night is still dark. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, often abbreviated as CBTI, is now the first-line treatment recommended by the American College of Physicians for chronic insomnia, specifically over sleep medication. It is a structured program that targets the thoughts, habits, and behaviors that perpetuate poor sleep, not by adding a chemical to the system, but by systematically reshaping the relationship between the person and the bedroom, between the mind and the act of sleeping. Techniques include stimulus control, which builds a strong association between the bed and sleep restriction, which temporarily consolidates the sleep window to increase sleep pressure, and cognitive restructuring, which challenges the unhelpful beliefs that feed nighttime anxiety. Its effects are lasting in ways that medication typically is not. One of the simplest and most evidence-supported tools for improving sleep is also one of the most consistently neglected: a fixed wake time. When you wake at the same time every morning, regardless of when you fell asleep, you anchor your circadian clock to a reliable external signal. This consistency trains the brain to begin its sleep-initiating cascade at a predictable time each evening, because it knows approximately when morning will arrive. Sleep researchers emphasize wake time more than bedtime, because bedtime is variable. It depends on how tired you are, how your day went, but wake time can be chosen and held. Over weeks, this single habit reshapes the entire architecture of the night. The glymphatic system is a network of fluid-filled channels that runs alongside the blood vessels of the brain. During sleep, it performs a form of biological housekeeping that the waking brain cannot accomplish as efficiently. Cerebrospinal fluid pulses through these channels, flushing waste products, including proteins associated with neurodegenerative disease, out of brain tissue and into the lymphatic system. Research suggests these channels may widen significantly during sleep, increasing clearance capacity. This finding reframed sleep not as passive downtime, but as one of the brain's most active maintenance functions. The glymphatic system's role in sleep is well supported by animal research, with growing evidence in humans, though the precise mechanisms and full scope in human sleep continue to be explored. Consistent sleep deprivation does not merely make people feel tired. It progressively impairs the very cognitive faculties needed to accurately assess one's own impairment. Studies in which participants were sleep-restricted to 6 hours per night for 2 weeks showed a continuous decline in cognitive performance across the period. But participants consistently rated their own sleepiness as moderate, far lower than objective measures would indicate. This phenomenon, sometimes called the sleepiness blind spot, means that chronically underslept people are often functioning at a significant deficit without being fully aware of it. They have adapted to a new, diminished baseline. The brain, in its exhausted resourcefulness, redefines normal rather than acknowledging the gap. The body clock runs on a period of approximately 24 hours and 11 minutes in most adults, slightly longer than the actual solar day. This small discrepancy is corrected each morning by exposure to light, which nudges the clock back into alignment. Without this daily correction, as happens in total darkness, such as in polar winters or in windowless environments, the circadian clock gradually drifts, and sleep timing shifts later and later in a pattern known as free running. Morning light exposure, even through clouds, is one of the most effective behavioral tools available for anchoring the circadian clock. Even 5 to 10 minutes of outdoor light within an hour of waking has measurable effects on sleep timing that evening. The temperature of the bedroom environment significantly affects the depth of sleep achieved within it. The body needs to lower its core temperature to initiate and maintain slow-wave sleep, and a cool room, generally between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit, facilitates this more easily than a warm one. Research has shown that overheated sleep environments reduce the proportion of deep sleep and increase nighttime waking. Interestingly, warming the skin through a warm bath or shower taken 1 to 2 hours before bed can paradoxically accelerate sleep onset by drawing blood to the surface of the body and promoting heat loss, which cools the core more rapidly. The bath is a prelude to cooling, not warmth, that the body then carries into sleep. Mindfulness-based practices, when applied specifically to the bedtime period, have been found in multiple controlled studies to reduce the time it takes to fall asleep and to decrease middle-of-the-night waking. The mechanism appears to involve a reduction in pre-sleep cognitive arousal. Mindfulness trains the practitioner to observe thoughts without engaging with them, which interrupts the ruminative loop that keeps the default mode network overactive at bedtime. Research from Johns Hopkins has suggested that mindfulness practices can reduce nighttime anxiety substantially, with effects comparable in some cases to medication for mild to moderate insomnia. The practice does not require silence or perfection. It asks only that the mind notice what it is doing, and gently, without force, return to the breath. Sleep architecture, the specific pattern of sleep stages across a night, is not the same at every age, and understanding how it shifts can reduce anxiety about what good sleep is supposed to look like. Infants spend about 50% of sleep in REM, a proportion that drops through childhood. Adults typically spend 20%. Deep, slow-wave sleep peaks in adolescence and early adulthood, then gradually declines, which is why many adults in their 40s find their sleep lighter than before. This shift is normal and biological. It reflects a changing brain, not a broken one. The capacity for restorative sleep does not disappear with age. Its expression simply changes, quietly, as the rest of us do. Take a slow breath in now. Feel the rise of your chest, the small, reliable lift that happens even while you rest. Your brain has been working tonight, filing and sorting the facts of the day. And now, for a moment, it doesn't need to. Feel the heaviness of your legs, the weight of your arms against the surface beneath you. Notice how the edges of things, the edges of sounds, of thoughts, of the room, seem slightly softer now than when you first lay down. That softening is not sleep, but it is the direction of sleep, and you are already moving toward it. The concept of sleep hygiene, the set of behavioral habits that support consistent, restorative sleep, has been widely discussed, but researchers caution that no single habit, in isolation, produces dramatic change. Sleep responds to systems, not single interventions. A consistent wake time, a cool and dark room, reduced evening light exposure, limited caffeine after 2 in the afternoon, and a brief wind-down routine form a cluster of reinforcing conditions. When practiced together, they gradually shift the brain's baseline expectation towards sleep, making deep rest more predictable. Not because any one rule is magic, but because the entire environment begins to speak the same quiet language. Napping has a complicated relationship with nighttime sleep, and the research reflects that complexity. Short naps of 20 to 30 minutes, timed before 3 in the afternoon, have been shown to improve afternoon alertness, mood, and cognitive performance without substantially reducing nighttime sleep pressure. Longer naps, however, those lasting 60 minutes or more, carry the risk of inducing sleep inertia. Agrog, disoriented state that arises when the brain is awakened from deep, slow-wave sleep. Naps that extend past 90 minutes can meaningfully reduce the adenosine load, lowering the homeostatic pressure that helps drive the depth of nighttime sleep. For people working to improve nighttime sleep quality, short strategic naps are generally preferable to longer ones. The relationship between sleep and immune function is bidirectional. Each shapes the other in ways that have been well documented across decades of research. During sleep, the immune system releases cytokines, proteins that coordinate the inflammatory response and help the body fight infection. Sleep deprivation reduces the production of these cytokines and has been shown to decrease the effectiveness of vaccines, with sleep-deprived subjects producing fewer antibodies following vaccination than those who slept normally. In the other direction, illness raises sleep pressure and increases time spent in deep sleep, reflecting the immune system's demand for the restorative processes that sleep provides. Sleep and immunity are not merely related. They are, in a genuine biological sense, codependent. Stress is one of the most common disruptors of sleep, and the mechanism is well understood. When the brain perceives a threat, real or anticipated, it activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, triggering the release of cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones evolve to mobilize the body for immediate physical response, which is the opposite of what sleep requires. Elevated cortisol in the evening delays sleep onset, suppresses deep, slow-wave sleep, and increases the likelihood of early morning waking. Chronic stress reshapes the cortisol curve over time, gradually shifting the body toward a state of sustained, low-level arousal that makes deep sleep harder to reach. Writing. Specifically, the act of externalizing worry onto paper before bed has been studied as a technique for reducing the cognitive arousal that interferes with sleep onset. One well-designed study asked participants to spend 5 minutes before bed either writing a to-do list for the following day or writing about completed tasks. Those who wrote the to-do list fell asleep significantly faster. The proposed mechanism is that articulating unfinished tasks discharges their mental urgency, the open-loop quality that keeps the mind circling back. The brain, satisfied that the information has been recorded somewhere outside itself, is somewhat more willing to release it. It is a small act, but in the architecture of the night, small acts accumulate. The brain's sensitivity to noise during sleep is not uniform across the night. In the early cycles, dominated by deep, slow-wave sleep, the sleeping brain is more effectively shielded from external sounds, partly through the gatekeeping function of sleep spindles. In the later cycles, as REM becomes more prominent and sleep becomes lighter, the brain becomes progressively more responsive to sound, which is why many people find that a sound at 3 in the morning wakes them easily, while the same sound at midnight might not. White noise and consistent background sound work by masking variable acoustic events, reducing the contrast between silence and sudden noise that the brain monitors even during sleep. The gut microbiome, the vast community of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms living in the digestive tract, has emerged as an unexpected participant in sleep regulation, Research in both animal models and humans has found associations between microbiome composition and sleep quality, with some bacterial species influencing the production of neurotransmitters, including serotonin and gamma-aminobutyric acid, that play roles in the brain's sleep-wake cycle. Disruptions to the microbiome through poor diet, antibiotics, or chronic stress appear to correlate with changes in sleep architecture. While direct causation in humans remains an active area of investigation, the gut-brain axis is increasingly recognized as a relevant pathway in understanding why sleep responds so broadly to lifestyle factors. Chronotypes, the natural variation in individual sleep-wake preference, are substantially rooted in genetics. Research involving genome-wide association studies has identified hundreds of genetic variants associated with being a morning person versus an evening person. Late chronotypes, sometimes called night owls, are not lazy or undisciplined. Their circadian clocks are biologically calibrated to a later phase, which means their sleep drive peaks later and their melatonin onset occurs later, forcing a late chronotype to wake consistently at 6 in the morning, as standard work schedules often do, is the equivalent of asking them to perform across multiple time zones every day. Chronotype awareness is increasingly considered in workplace scheduling and school start time policy for this reason. There is a documented phenomenon called the first night effect, in which people sleep significantly worse in an unfamiliar environment than they do at home. Researchers using brain imaging have found that during the first night in a new location, one hemisphere of the brain shows measurably lighter sleep than the other, maintaining a form of vigilant readiness while the other half rests more deeply. This asymmetric sleep is similar to what has been observed in marine mammals, which sleep with one brain hemisphere at a time to remain alert to their environment. In humans, the effect typically diminishes over subsequent nights as the brain acquires enough information about the new space to lower its threat assessment. Pain and sleep are locked in a bidirectional relationship that is, for many people, one of the most difficult cycles to interrupt. Chronic pain disrupts sleep. It increases arousals, reduces deep sleep, and fragments the night. But poor sleep simultaneously lowers pain tolerance, increasing the subjective intensity of otherwise manageable pain. Sleep deprivation has been shown to reduce activity in the nucleus accumbens, a brain region involved in pain modulation, and to increase activity in the somatosensory cortex, which processes pain signals. Improving sleep, even partially, can reduce perceived pain in chronic conditions, making further sleep easier. Breaking into this cycle from the sleep side is a recognized clinical strategy. The relationship between sleep and emotional memory is one of the more nuanced areas of sleep neuroscience. REM sleep appears to perform a specific function in processing emotionally charged memories, extracting their informational content while gradually reducing the raw emotional charge attached to them. Matthew Walker at the University of California, Berkeley, has described this as overnight therapy, though the term is evocative rather than clinical. What the research shows more specifically is that people who sleep between an emotional experience and a later recall of it tend to remember the factual details clearly while reporting less acute distress about the memory. Sleep does not erase. It seems, over time, to soften, Social jet lag, a term coined by sleep researcher Till Roneberg, describes the misalignment between the body's internal clock and the external schedule most working adults maintain. It is measured as the difference in sleep timing between weekdays and weekends. The weekday alarm that cuts sleep short, and the weekend lie-in that allows the body to wake when it chooses. The average social jet lag in industrialized countries is estimated at about 1 to 1.5 hours. Research has linked higher social jet lag to increased rates of obesity, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, and mood disorder. Consequences not of sleep deprivation alone, but of the chronic circadian disruption that irregular timing imposes on every system of the body. One of the more counterintuitive findings in sleep research is that trying harder to fall asleep tends to make it more difficult. The state of heightened effort, monitoring breathing, checking for drowsiness, evaluating one's own success at relaxing, is precisely the alert, self-focused attention that keeps the brain in a waking mode. A therapeutic technique called paradoxical intention addresses this. Patients are instructed to lie in bed and try to stay awake, without doing anything stimulating. In multiple studies, this technique has reduced the time it takes to fall asleep. The brain, released from the pressure of performance, finds its way into rest more easily when it is no longer being watched. The autonomic nervous system has two primary branches: the sympathetic, which governs the fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic, which governs rest and recovery. Sleep onset requires a shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic dominance. Heart rate slows, breathing deepens, blood pressure falls, and digestive processes resume. Slow, deliberate breathing, particularly exhalations longer than inhalations, activates the vagus nerve and promotes parasympathetic tone. Techniques such as 4-7-8 breathing, box breathing, and extended exhale practices have been studied as pre-sleep interventions and found to meaningfully reduce heart rate variability in ways consistent with the autonomic shift toward rest. The breath is one of the few physiological levers available to conscious influence that reaches into the nervous system's deeper regulation. The sleeping brain generates two types of electrical oscillations that are central to memory consolidation and cognitive restoration. The first are slow oscillations, large, sweeping waves that travel across the cortex during deep sleep, coordinating communication between brain regions. The second are sleep spindles, briefer, faster bursts that arise in the thalamus and radiate outward. Recent research has shown that these two rhythms coordinate with remarkable precision. Slow oscillations create a window during which spindles arrive in clusters. And this synchrony appears to be the specific mechanism through which the hippocampus transfers new information to the cortex for long-term storage. The brain, during its quietest seeming moments, is orchestrating a kind of electrical conversation between its most fundamental structures. If these quiet facts are helping you settle in tonight, a gentle like or subscribe helps another tired mind find their way here too. That's all. Rest now. The hippocampus, the brain structure most central to the formation of new memories, shows a striking dependency on sleep for its full function. During waking, the hippocampus encodes new experiences rapidly, acting like a temporary buffer. During sleep, it coordinates with the prefrontal cortex to consolidate and distribute these memories more broadly. In people with sleep deprivation, hippocampal function is impaired in ways that reduce not only memory formation, but also the capacity to place new information into meaningful context. The brain's ability to learn is not a fixed trait. It is a renewable resource, and the process by which it renews itself happens reliably every night that sleep is allowed to run its full course. Dreams, the vivid, often narrative mental experiences of REM sleep, remain scientifically fascinating and only partially understood. Current leading theories include the idea that dreams serve an emotional processing function, helping the brain work through charged experiences in a neurochemically distinct state, one notably low in norepinephrine, the anxiety-associated neurotransmitter. Other theories propose that dreams reflect the brain's attempt to make meaning from the spontaneous pattern of neural firing that characterizes REM. What emerging research has begun to suggest is that vivid, immersive dreams may contribute to a subjective sense of deeper sleep. People who report more immersive dreaming tend to feel more rested than those whose sleep is experientially quiet. The timing of meals relative to sleep has measurable effects on sleep quality. Researchers studying the gut-brain axis have found that eating large meals close to bedtime increases arousal, delays melatonin onset, and fragments the night. The digestive process generates metabolic activity that competes with the quieting systems the brain needs for sleep initiation. Conversely, certain nutrients, magnesium, found in leafy greens and nuts, tryptophan, found in turkey and dairy, and melatonin precursors, found in tart cherries and kiwi, have been studied as dietary supports for sleep. A handful of studies have found that eating 2 kiwi fruits before bed reduced time to sleep onset and increased total sleep time, though mechanisms are still being clarified. The concept of sleep efficiency, the proportion of time spent in bed that is actually spent asleep, is a more clinically useful measure than total sleep duration alone. An adult who spends 9 hours in bed but lies awake for 2 of them has an efficiency of 78%, which is considered below optimal. Sleep restriction therapy, a core component of CBTI, deliberately compresses the sleep window to match actual sleep time, temporarily reducing total sleep, but dramatically increasing efficiency and consolidating the night into a deeper, more continuous block. Over time, this approach rebuilds the brain's association between the bed and actual sleep, restoring the efficiency that fragmented and anxious sleep erodes. There is a measurable effect of social connection on sleep quality that has only recently attracted sustained research attention. People who report greater feelings of loneliness show elevated levels of nighttime cortisol, increased sleep fragmentation, and lower proportions of slow-wave sleep compared to socially connected peers, even when controlling for objective life circumstances. The relationship appears to be bidirectional. Loneliness disrupts sleep, and sleep disruption increases the perception of social isolation. Brain imaging studies have found that sleep-deprived individuals show greater social withdrawal and interpret ambiguous social signals more negatively, creating a feedback loop in which poor sleep gradually erodes the felt sense of connection that might otherwise help anchor the night. The brain produces a molecule called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, that plays a central role in synaptic plasticity, the ability of neural connections to strengthen and adapt. Sleep, particularly slow-wave sleep, is associated with increased BDNF expression in key brain regions, including the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. Exercise also increases BDNF, which may partly explain why the combination of regular physical activity and consistent sleep is so reliably associated with cognitive resilience across the lifespan. While BDNF's role in sleep-related plasticity is well supported, the full complexity of its actions in the human brain continues to be a productive area of ongoing investigation. People who keep irregular sleep schedules, going to bed and waking at different times from day to day, show measurably worse sleep quality, lower slow-wave sleep, and reduced cognitive performance compared to those who maintain consistent timing, even when total sleep time is matched. The consistency of timing is, in itself, a form of biological information. The circadian system anticipates sleep based on pattern, not just duration. And when the pattern is irregular, the system works harder to initiate each night's sleep without accumulated expectation. Regularity is not rigidity. It is the brain's way of saying, at a cellular level, that it knows what comes next and can begin preparing in advance. The relationship between sleep and creativity has been studied in the context of both REM and NREM sleep, with different findings for each. REM sleep, with its elevated acetylcholine and associative neural activity, appears to support the kind of loose, non-linear thinking that underlies creative insight, connecting information from disparate domains in ways that waking, goal-directed thought rarely does. Several studies have documented a spike in problem-solving ability for ambiguous or creative tasks following a period of REM-rich sleep, and a handful of famous creative breakthroughs in chemistry, mathematics, and music have reportedly arrived at the boundary between sleep and waking. The brain's locus coeruleus, a small nucleus in the brainstem and the primary source of the neurotransmitter norepinephrine, shows one of its most dramatic patterns of activity during sleep. During waking, the locus coeruleus fires steadily, releasing norepinephrine that sustains arousal and attention. During NREM sleep, its activity diminishes substantially. During REM sleep, it falls almost entirely silent, a neurochemical condition that may be essential for the emotional processing that REM provides. Since norepinephrine is associated with anxiety and threat detection, this nightly silencing of the brain's alarm system may be part of why REM sleep, when it runs its full course, often leaves people feeling emotionally lighter. Sleep talking, known clinically as somniloquy, is a relatively common parasomnia that occurs most often in children and tends to decrease with age, though it can persist into adulthood. It occurs across multiple sleep stages and does not typically indicate any underlying disorder. What is more interesting neurologically is what sleep talking reveals. The language processing systems of the brain remain partially active during sleep, and in some cases, these systems generate coherent speech. Studies examining the content of sleep-talking episodes have found that subjects sometimes produce grammatically correct, semantically meaningful utterances, suggesting that the language network continues to operate in a form of reduced, unmoored processing, even when consciousness has largely withdrawn from the scene. You are halfway through the night now, or perhaps you have already drifted past facts you cannot quite remember. And that is perfectly fine. Let your body sink a little more. Notice the places where you are holding tension. The jaw, perhaps the hands, the space between the shoulder blades. You don't need to release it all. Just notice it, the way you might notice clouds passing through a quiet sky. The brain has been doing its quiet work tonight, as it always does. Learning, sorting, preparing for tomorrow. And now, for this moment, it simply rests. And so do you. The brain generates its own endogenous opioids during sleep, including beta-endorphin, which may contribute to the sense of physical comfort and relief that deep sleep provides. Pain tolerance, which is substantially mediated by the opioid system, is measurably lower in people who are sleep-deprived. And this reduction can be partially explained by the diminished endogenous opioid activity that accompanies poor sleep. The connection between sleep and pain modulation is not metaphorical. It is chemical, rooted in the same neurological systems that regulate both suffering and relief. Every night of deep sleep is, among its many other functions, a small act of internal medicine. The theta brainwave, oscillating at roughly 4 to 8 Hertz, is the dominant rhythm of the drowsing, not quite a sleep state, and also the rhythm most associated with creative and meditative mental states. Many people who practice meditation report entering theta states, which may partly explain the overlap between meditation and improved sleep. Both involve a similar shift from the faster beta and gamma waves of active thinking toward the slower rhythms of rest. Learning to enter theta voluntarily, through breath, body scan, or simply allowing the mind to unfocus, is, in a practical sense, learning the antechamber of sleep. The body's immune system mounts much of its most active surveillance during sleep, including production of natural killer cells that patrol for aberrant or infected cells. A landmark study found that people who slept fewer than 7 hours per night were more likely to develop a cold after direct exposure to a rhinovirus than those who slept 8 or more hours. The relationship held after controlling for stress, age, and other variables. Sleep is not merely associated with good immune function. In controlled experimental conditions, it is one of its most consistent predictors. The night shift of immunity runs quietly, without instruction from the conscious mind. Growing evidence suggests the quality of sleep in midlife, the 40s and 50s, has lasting effects on brain health decades later. Longitudinal studies have found that poor sleep quality in midlife is associated with higher rates of cognitive decline and dementia in later life, independent of other risk factors. Proposed mechanisms include cumulative impairment of the brain's nightly waste clearance processes and the gradual erosion of neuroplasticity that follows chronic sleep disruption. Sleep in midlife is not merely comfort. For the aging brain, consistently restorative sleep may be one of the most meaningful forms of long-term maintenance available. Quiet, nightly, and profoundly consequential. The ventrolateral preoptic area, a small cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus, acts as one of the brain's primary sleep-promoting regions, and its relationship with arousal systems is notably competitive. Sleep researchers describe the transition from wakefulness to sleep as resembling a switch rather than a dial. The brain flips from one state to the other relatively quickly, driven by the inhibitory activity of the ventrolateral preoptic area, which suppresses multiple arousal-promoting brain systems simultaneously. This switching mechanism evolved to prevent unstable intermediate states. You are generally either awake or asleep, not meaningfully halfway between. The brain prefers resolution to ambiguity, even in rest. Animals across the animal kingdom sleep, and the diversity of sleep strategies in nature offers a quiet reassurance about sleep's fundamental necessity. Dolphins sleep with one hemisphere at a time, remaining partially alert. Migratory birds enter microsleeps during flight. Elephants sleep only 2 to 4 hours per day. Great apes build fresh sleeping nests each evening, selecting soft materials with apparent preference. From the smallest insects to the largest land mammals, the drive to periodically rest and consolidate is nearly universal. Sleep is not a human luxury. It is an ancient contract, one written into the biology of almost every creature that has ever lived on this planet. Polyphasic sleep, dividing sleep into multiple, shorter periods rather than one block, has attracted interest. But long-term research remains limited. Historical evidence suggests pre-industrial humans may have slept in 2 distinct nocturnal blocks with a quiet waking interval between them. A pattern historian Roger Ekirch documented through pre-industrial records and literature. Whether this reflects a natural human sleep template suppressed by modern schedules, or a historical adaptation to the absence of artificial light, remains debated. The pressure toward a single consolidated nocturnal sleep is present. At minimum, partly a cultural and environmental product rather than an absolute biological necessity. The amygdala, the brain's alarm center, is among the regions most directly affected by sleep deprivation. After a single night without sleep, the amygdala becomes significantly more reactive to negative emotional stimuli, and its connection to the prefrontal cortex, which normally regulates emotional response, weakens measurably. This pattern resembles neural activity seen in certain anxiety and mood disorders, suggesting that even acute sleep loss temporarily creates a neurological state of heightened vulnerability. The well-slept brain can hold its fear more lightly. The exhausted brain cannot always distinguish clearly between a real threat and the shadow of one. Cognitive training, structured exercises designed to strengthen attention, working memory, and executive function, has been investigated as a pathway to better sleep. Recent preliminary research found that adults with sleep difficulties who completed a 4-week computerized cognitive training program showed meaningful reductions in insomnia severity alongside improvements in mood. The proposed mechanism involves the default mode network. Training executive control during the day may help the brain disengage from ruminative thinking at night. The findings were preliminary, but they pointed toward the intriguing possibility that the brain can be trained during waking hours to find its way to sleep more easily. The relationship between sleep and weight regulation involves several intersecting hormonal pathways. Sleep deprivation increases levels of ghrelin, the hunger-promoting hormone, and decreases levels of leptin, which signals satiety. This hormonal shift increases appetite, particularly for high-calorie, carbohydrate-dense foods, without any actual increase in energy expenditure. Studies have found that people who are sleep-deprived consume several hundred additional calories per day compared to well-rested counterparts, and that this pattern, sustained over time, contributes meaningfully to weight gain. The body under sleep pressure, it seems, searches for energy in food because it cannot find the recovery it needs in rest. Certain cognitive habits, recurring thought patterns, have been consistently associated with chronic insomnia. Catastrophizing about the consequences of poor sleep, monitoring the body for signs of failure, and rigid beliefs about necessary sleep amounts. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia targets these patterns not with positive thinking, but by examining their accuracy and reducing their authority. Many people who struggle with sleep have been running an anxious commentary about sleep for years. Changing that commentary changes the neural state it produces, which changes in quiet and gradual ways. What becomes possible when the lights go out? The body undergoes a systematic shift in cardiovascular function during sleep that is central to its protective effects on heart health. Blood pressure drops significantly during deep sleep, a phenomenon called nocturnal dipping, which gives the cardiovascular system a period of reduced workload each night. People who do not show this drop, called non-dippers, have higher rates of hypertension and cardiovascular events. Chronic sleep deprivation disrupts this dipping pattern, maintaining elevated blood pressure across the full 24-hour cycle. Long-term studies have found robust associations between habitual short sleep duration and elevated risk of cardiovascular disease, independent of traditional risk factors like smoking, weight, and physical inactivity. The sleeping brain is not, as was once assumed, cut off from the external world. It continues to monitor the acoustic environment throughout the night, as demonstrated by studies using electroencephalography to record brain responses to sounds played during sleep. Familiar voices, particularly the sleeper's own name, reliably produce stronger brain responses than unfamiliar names. Even during sleep, the brain maintains a form of sentinel awareness, filtering most input as irrelevant while remaining alert to personally significant signals. This sentinel function is part of what makes sleep in an unfamiliar environment feel so different from sleep in a place the brain has learned to trust. Sleep plays a specific and well-documented role in motor learning, the consolidation of physical skills. Studies of musicians, athletes, and surgical trainees have consistently found that performance on newly acquired motor tasks improves significantly following sleep, compared to an equivalent waking interval. The motor cortex replays and refines new movement patterns during slow-wave sleep, a process essential for the smooth automaticity that distinguishes expert performance from effortful repetition. This is partly why the advice to sleep on a difficult new skill has a genuine biological basis. The night is not wasted time between practice sessions. It is the session in which things quietly become permanent. Research on the neural basis of insight. The sudden, non-linear resolution of a problem that has resisted direct effort has found that sleep, particularly the transition between sleep and waking, is a privileged state for its emergence. Studies using classic insight problems have found that participants who slept between initial exposure and later testing showed higher rates of sudden correct solution than those who remained awake. The brain in the hypnagogic state, the floating, partially conscious edge of sleep onset, appears to access associations that waking, focused thought tends to suppress. The solution was there all along. Sleep, it seems, simply stopped getting in the way. The pineal gland, the small, pine cone-shaped structure embedded deep in the center of the brain, was described by 17th century philosopher René Descartes as the seat of the soul. Whatever one makes of that claim, the pineal gland does perform a genuinely remarkable biological function. It translates the light-dark signals received from the retina into melatonin, rhythmically communicating the state of the external world to every organ in the body. It is, in a functional sense, the body's broadcaster of darkness, the structure through which the night reaches inward. That such a small cluster of cells should carry such a fundamental message is one of biology's quieter marvels. The effects of sleep deprivation on decision-making have been studied extensively, particularly in high-stakes occupational contexts. Research on physicians, airline pilots, and military personnel has documented that sleep-deprived individuals show a characteristic pattern. They become risk-averse when decisions involve potential losses, but risk-seeking when potential gains are framed. The opposite of balanced judgment. This is thought to reflect the differential sensitivity of the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system under fatigue. The careful, deliberate prefrontal weighing of options degrades faster than the emotional pull of reward. Sleep-deprived decision-making is not merely slower. Its architecture changes in ways that are difficult to detect from the inside. Lucid dreaming. The state in which a dreamer becomes aware they are dreaming and can sometimes influence the dream's content is a genuine neurological phenomenon, documented in laboratory studies through prearranged eye movement signals that sleeping participants make to communicate their lucidity. Electroencephalographic recordings of lucid dreamers show elevated activity in the prefrontal and frontoparietal regions, areas associated with self-awareness and metacognition, relative to non-lucid REM sleep. The capacity for lucid dreaming varies between individuals and can be trained through specific induction techniques. It represents a partial reactivation of reflective consciousness within a state that is otherwise defined by its suspension. Sleep appears to play a role in the calibration of emotional memory that goes beyond simple consolidation. Experiments have shown that when people encode memories with strong, negative emotional content and then sleep, subsequent recall of those memories tends to be more neutral. The factual details remain, but the emotional charge is reduced. This selective emotional fading during sleep may help explain why people often feel better able to cope with difficult situations after sleeping on them. The brain is not erasing experience. It is, through the nightly chemistry of REM, adjusting the emotional volume, leaving the memory intact while lowering the pitch of its distress. The human body has dozens of secondary circadian clocks. In the liver, the pancreas, the muscles, the gut, all coordinated by the master clock in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. When sleep timing is disrupted through shift work or irregular schedules, These peripheral clocks can fall out of synchrony with the central clock, a condition called circadian misalignment. Research has linked chronic misalignment to increased rates of metabolic disease, gastrointestinal disturbance, and immune dysfunction. The body, when its clocks are speaking different times, must work harder to maintain all the coordinated processes that health depends on. Consistent sleep timing is, in this broader sense, a form of systemic care. The nightly ritual of preparing for sleep, dimming lights, reducing stimulation, performing consistent pre-sleep activities, works in part through classical conditioning. The brain associates environmental cues with the neurological states that consistently follow them. Over time, the sequence of events that precedes sleep becomes, itself, a signal to the brain that sleep is coming, triggering the release of melatonin, the drop in body temperature, and the shift in autonomic tone that sleep requires. This is the mechanism behind stimulus control therapy. Building such a strong and consistent association between the bedroom and sleep that simply being in that environment becomes a biological invitation to rest. Research on the sleep of children and adolescents has consistently found that they require more sleep than adults, and that they are, across most industrialized countries, consistently getting less. Adolescents have a biologically delayed circadian phase, meaning their bodies naturally prefer later bedtimes and wake times than early school start times allow. The resulting chronic sleep restriction in teenagers is associated with poorer academic performance, increased emotional reactivity, higher rates of depression and anxiety, and elevated accident risk. Sleep scientists have been among the most consistent advocates for later school start times, a policy change that, where it has been implemented, shows measurable benefits in student health and performance. Worry is, in sleep medicine terms, a form of mental problem solving without an off switch. The brain worries because it has learned that anticipating threats reduces their impact. But worry at bedtime activates the same arousal systems as actual threat, flooding the body with cortisol, preparing it for action, the precise opposite of sleep onset. Scheduled worry time, deliberately setting aside 15 minutes earlier in the evening to write down concerns, has been found to reduce nighttime rumination. It gives the brain a designated container for its concerns, so the night itself can remain a little more empty and still. Sleep deprivation increases activity in the striatum, the brain's reward-seeking center, while decreasing connectivity with the prefrontal cortex that normally moderates impulse. This shift may explain why tired people crave high-reward stimuli, rich food, screens, novelty, and find it harder to resist them. The brain under sleep pressure seeks compensatory stimulation. It reaches for the quick. This is not weakness. It is the biology of a system that needs rest and cannot find it, reaching instead for whatever brings the fastest return. Sleep does not merely restore the body. It restores the particular kind of patience that good judgment requires. There is something profound in what science has uncovered about sleep and the self. The brain that wakes after deep, restorative sleep is not the same brain that fell asleep. It has processed, consolidated, and reorganized its experience. Emotional memory has been adjusted. Motor skills refined. Metabolic waste cleared. The default mode network has quieted and reset. Sleep is not a subtraction from life. It is one of the primary means by which the mind maintains its coherence. Your brain is not broken. It simply needs the conditions, given consistently, that let it descend into the deep rest that restores it. Breathe slowly. There is nothing you need to solve right now. The brain has been learning something tonight, in its quiet way. Listening to these facts, the way water listens to the shape of a stone. You may not remember all of them. That's perfectly fine. The ones that settle. The ones that pass. Feel the rhythm of your breathing now. Slower than when you began. The night has deepened around you. The thoughts, if they are still there, are a little further away now. Rest. Simply rest. You've done enough. The rest of the work belongs to sleep. Sleep debt is real, but it is not perfectly recoverable. After multiple nights of insufficient sleep, a single, long recovery sleep restores alertness, only partially. The cognitive deficits accumulated across the deprivation period do not fully resolve after one night. Research suggests that full recovery may require several nights of adequate sleep, and some studies have found that certain cognitive functions remain subtly impaired even after apparent recovery. The implication is simple. Consistent. Adequate sleep prevents a debt that is genuinely difficult to fully repay. The brain learns to maintain sleep in part through conditioning. People who have spent years lying awake anxiously, or associating the bedroom with frustration, have trained their brains, unintentionally, to treat the sleep environment as a place of alertness. This can be retrained. Consistent timing and patient repetition gradually shift the brain back toward the quieter state it is capable of. Learning to sleep well is not a dramatic change. It is, mostly, a very slow unlearning. The brain during deep sleep reaches the lowest levels of metabolic activity it experiences across the entire 24-hour cycle, a kind of biological trough from which it emerges renewed. This metabolic quieting allows the brain to allocate resources toward repair rather than performance, and the feeling of waking from genuinely deep sleep reflects this restoration. Clear, grounded, capable. Not everyone reaches this depth every night, but every night that approaches it is a night of genuine recovery. Regardless of what the clock shows, the relationship between reading before bed and sleep quality is generally positive, with studies suggesting that reading a physical book, rather than a screen, can reduce cognitive arousal and facilitate the transition towards sleep. The act of reading occupies just enough attention to interrupt ruminative thought loops while not generating the alertness that screens and stimulating content produce. It gives the mind something gentle to follow, a path that leads, eventually, to the edge of the page, and then to quiet. There is evidence that the brain preferentially consolidates emotionally important memories during sleep. Not all memories equally, but the ones that carried weight. This selectivity suggests that sleep is not merely a filing system, but something more like an editorial process. The sleeping brain appears to make choices, guided by emotional salience, about what is worth keeping in high resolution and what can be allowed to fade. The night is not neutral. It has its own quiet preferences. The experience of hypnagogia, the hallucinatory images and sensations that arise in the borderland between wakefulness and sleep, reflects a fascinating transitional state of the brain. During hypnagogia, the brain is partially in sleep mode and partially awake, generating visual and auditory content while the faculty of critical evaluation is already withdrawing. Many people who meditate regularly report entering states that feel similar. It is the brain loosening its grip on the organized world, letting the edges soften, letting images come without asking them to make sense. The body's immune surveillance does not pause during sleep. It intensifies. Natural killer cells, which destroy infected and cancerous cells, show peak activity during the overnight hours, a pattern driven by the same circadian rhythms that govern sleep itself. This is not coincidence. The immune system and the sleep system share regulatory pathways, and disrupting one consistently disrupts the other. Every night of adequate sleep is, among its other gifts, a quiet deployment of the body's internal defense. Some of the most consistent predictors of good sleep are not dramatic interventions. They are small, daily acts. Keeping the bedroom cool and dark, avoiding bright light before bed, going to sleep and waking at roughly the same time, eating the last large meal several hours before lying down, and spending a few minutes in physical movement during the day. None of these is magic. Together, they form a language the brain understands, a set of cues that say, in the body's own dialect, it is time. Deep sleep and creativity share a relationship through the process of memory consolidation. During slow-wave sleep, the brain does not simply replay memories. It also finds relationships between them, connecting experiences from different contexts in ways that can produce new understanding by morning. This is why the advice to sleep on a difficult problem has genuine scientific support. The sleeping brain, freed from the constraints of directed thought, is sometimes more capable of finding the connection than the waking brain that was looking for it. The sound of rain and other forms of consistent, low-intensity natural noise is widely reported as sleep-promoting, and there is a physiological basis for this. Steady, non-variable sound reduces the brain's vigilance response by eliminating the acoustic contrast between silence and sudden noise. The auditory cortex, which continues to process sound during sleep, is soothed rather than startled by consistent ambient sound. The rain does not create sleep. It simply removes one of the small reasons the brain might choose to stay alert. The transition from wakefulness to sleep is not a cliff's edge, but a gradual slope, and the experience of falling involves the brain selectively shutting down one function at a time. Voluntary muscle control quiets first. Then external awareness dims. Then logical sequencing loosens, and images begin to arise that follow an associative rather than rational logic. Finally, the monitoring function itself, the part that notices it is falling asleep, releases its watch. This is the last thing to go. And then, there is only the night. There is a quality to deep sleep that is difficult to describe from the outside, but unmistakable from the inside. a sense of having been genuinely away. Not merely rested, but absent, transported somewhere with no narrative and no clear memory. This is slow-wave sleep at its deepest, and the stage associated with the most profound physical restoration. Chasing it is counterproductive. Creating the conditions for it. Consistency. Quiet. Cool. Calm. Is, in the end, what this entire science of sleep comes down to. Waking naturally, without an alarm, after a full night of sleep, produces a distinctly different hormonal profile than waking to an abrupt alarm. Natural waking involves a gradual rise in cortisol that begins roughly an hour before the eyes open, gently preparing the brain and body for consciousness. Alarm waking interrupts this process, producing a brief cortisol spike that, over time, the body begins to dread. When circumstances allow, waking naturally is not indulgence. It is simply how the brain prefers to return. Gratitude, practiced briefly before sleep, has been studied as a cognitive tool for improving sleep quality. In several trials, participants who spent a few minutes writing about things they were grateful for fell asleep faster and reported better sleep quality than control groups who journaled about neutral events. The proposed mechanism involves a shift away from ruminative, threat-focused cognition toward a more expansive and positively valenced mental state. The brain, pointed toward what it has rather than what it fears, finds the door to rest a little more easily. The brain, during the deepest part of the night, produces its largest and slowest electrical waves. These are called K-complexes and slow oscillations, and they roll across the cortex at roughly 1 cycle per second, slower than any thought you can have while awake. In these moments, the brain is simultaneously its most synchronized and its most quiet. It is, in a way that waking life never quite achieves, completely organized around rest. This is what deep sleep looks like from the inside. Not emptiness. A purposeful, extraordinary stillness. Sleep is, at its most fundamental, an act of trust. The sleeping body is vulnerable, less aware, less responsive, less defended than the waking body. For sleep to deepen naturally, some part of the brain must decide that the environment is safe enough, that vigilance can be lowered, that the night holds no threat. This is why stress, unfamiliar places, and unresolved anxiety interfere so reliably with deep sleep. The brain cannot fully let go until it believes, at some biological level, that it is safe to do so. The science of sleep continues to evolve. Every year brings new understanding of the mechanisms through which sleep maintains the brain, regulates emotion, and supports the body's long-term health. What is already known is substantial, that the quiet hours contain more biological activity than any waking hour, that the mind works hardest when it appears to rest, and that the care we extend to our sleep is, in very direct ways, the care we extend to ourselves. Science will keep learning, but tonight, the facts are already enough. The breath slows during sleep. The heart slows. Digestion quickens. Quietly. Growth hormone rises. Immune cells multiply and patrol. memory solidifies. Emotional weight adjusts. The brain clears itself of the day's residue. And all of this, every repair, every consolidation, every quiet restoration, happens without any conscious instruction from the person in whose body it is occurring. Sleep is the most effortless and most essential thing we ever do. It asks only that we stop long enough to let it arrive. The body knows how to sleep. It has known for hundreds of millions of years, across species, across continents, across every variation of human experience. Whatever difficulties have accumulated in the relationship between this particular person and this particular act of rest, the capacity itself has not been lost. It has only been obscured by habit, by anxiety, by light, by noise, by the accumulated weight of days that never quite finished. Underneath all of that, the sleeping body is still there, still waiting, still capable. Tonight, while you have been listening, your brain has been doing what it always does: processing, sorting, settling. These facts have moved through you like water through a landscape, leaving small traces. That is how sleep science works on a person. Not as instruction, but as permission. Permission to understand that rest is biological, not moral. That struggling to sleep is not failure. That the brain has a path toward deep rest. And that path is not something you force. It is something you allow. The central question that opened tonight was this: can you train your mind into deeper sleep? Or is good rest something you are just born with? Science's answer, accumulated across decades, is patient and clear. Sleep responds to conditions. It deepens with consistency. It is disrupted by stress and restored by care. The brain learns what to expect and adjusts accordingly. Sleep is not a gift reserved for the fortunate. It is a skill that the brain, given the right conditions, is always willing to relearn. Perhaps the most important thing science has found about sleep is also the simplest. The brain does not need to be forced into rest. It needs to be allowed to find rest. The systems that drive sleep, the circadian clock, the adenosine pressure, the descending temperature, the dimming light, are already operating right now, in the body beneath you. They have always been working. All that is needed, tonight and every night, is to stop holding them back. Your brain knows how to do this. It always has. The big idea that has threaded through every fact tonight is this: your brain is not broken. It has simply not yet been given, consistently and patiently, the conditions it needs to descend into deep, restorative sleep. Those conditions are learnable. The habits are available. The science is clear. And the body, waiting beneath the noise of the day, is more than ready. It was born ready. It has been practicing for a very long time. Somewhere tonight, in thousands of bedrooms and quiet spaces, other people are lying in the same uncertainty you might have felt when you pressed play, wondering if sleep is something that will ever come easily. Science says it can. Not perfectly, not always, not without effort, but with time and patience and the small, consistent acts that signal to the brain that the night is safe. You are not alone in this, and the path forward is gentler than you think. The brain you bring to tomorrow is being built right now. In the quiet, in the dark, in the slow electrical rhythms moving through you as you rest. Sleep is not where life pauses. It is where the most essential work of being alive gets done. Tonight, you have already given it something. Your presence, and the willingness to be reminded that your brain is not broken. It has only been waiting for the right conditions. And you are creating them. Right now, tonight. You traveled far tonight. Through the chemistry of adenosine and the slow electrical orchestration of deep sleep. Through the nightly diplomacy between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. Through the quiet work of the glymphatic system, clearing away the day's residue. You visited the brain's alarm center and found it learnable. You found the sleep spindles. Those brief, elegant bursts of neural protection that stand guard over the night. You did not have to understand all of it. Some of it settled. Some of it passed. And some part of you, in listening, gave your brain permission to simply be a brain, doing exactly what it was built to do. Sleep science reminds us that rest is not a reward for a productive day. It is the foundation that makes any day possible at all. The most profound discovery in all of this research is perhaps the simplest. The sleeping brain is not absent. It is, in its quiet way, the most present it ever is. Let your breathing find its own rhythm now. You don't need to guide it. Feel the weight of your body, the particular and irreplaceable weight of this body, on this surface, on this night. The brain beneath you is already beginning its work. The slow waves are already forming. You don't need to do anything to help them along. The science has been spoken. The night has received it. And now there is nothing left to do but let the darkness, which has been waiting patiently all along, simply close around you. Sleep well. If this thoughtful exploration of the mind helped you relax or find your way towards sleep tonight, a gentle like and subscribe helps other sleepless souls discover this peaceful space too. It only takes a moment, but it means the world to us. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there is no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. You have traveled far tonight, through the science of the sleeping brain, through the chemistry of rest, through the quiet evidence that your mind knows how to find its way. You can allow these thoughts to fade now, like the last light of a late evening, leaving only the calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if the night itself were gently resting its weight upon you. If sleep comes, let it carry you smoothly, inevitably, into the place where thinking is no longer required. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting. But if they are closed, stay there. That is exactly where you need to be. Tomorrow, the science will still be there. The brain's capacity for deep rest will still be there. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, quiet mind. And remember, your brain is not broken. It is simply, at last, getting exactly what it has always needed. Good night.